So everybody's on, Jeff. We'll go ahead and get started.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
All right, good morning. I'm Mitch Mitchell, Chair of the San Diego Housing Commission Board of Commissioners. It is 9:03 on January 12th, 2023, and I'm going to call to order the special meeting of the board. The process we are using for today's meeting is authorized by Government Code Section 54953E, which was added by Assembly Bill 361. This allows the Housing Commission to use teleconferencing and provide the public with an opportunity to address the board through a call-in or internet-based option during a proclaimed state of emergency. The San Diego City Council on December 13th, 2022, and again on Tuesday of this week, January 10th, 2023, declared that the state of emergency continues to directly impact the abilities of members to meet safely in person. The council also declares that this applies to all boards, commissions, and committees of the city of San Diego. Today's special meeting is occurring by video conference with all board members, our interim president and CEO, housing commission staff, and general counsel participating by video. For the record, I will ask each board member to indicate your presence as I say your name. And before we get started, Happy New Year to all of you. Vice Chair Ryan Klumker.
Here.
Commissioner Stephanie Benvenuto.
Here.
Commissioner Joanna Hester.
Here.
Commissioner Kelly Hubbard.
Keely, but
I'm sorry, Kelly. Sorry, Keely. I apologize. I was reading something else in my notes. Keely Hubbard and Commissioner Melinda Vasquez.
Here.
Oh, Commissioner, there you go, Commissioner Vasquez. No members of the public are in attendance. However, members of the public may watch the video conference and hear the audio of today's meeting, which is being streamed live online. The agenda for today's meeting included a link to the website for the San Diego Housing Commission Board of Commissioners, where the public can access the live streaming for today's discussion. The public has been provided with an alternate opportunity to provide comments to the board through an online comment form and a toll-free phone number. A link to the online comment form was included on the agenda for today's special meeting, which was posted on the San Diego Commission website at www.sdhc.org on January 6, 2023. The closed session agenda for today's meeting was also posted on the Housing Commission's website on January 9th, 2023. The agendas in the public comment form explain that comments being about items on the agenda will be read into the record if they were submitted by 4 p.m. yesterday, January 11th. Non-agenda public comments submitted by 8 o'clock this morning will be read into the record. In addition, members of the public who wish to listen to today's meeting by phone and speak on an item may call the toll-free number that is included on the agenda. The toll-free number is 833-548-0276. When prompted, callers should enter the meeting ID number provided on the agenda, which again is 942-5564-6200. A participant ID number is not required, just press pound. Members of the public will remain muted until they are called upon to speak. When the comment period for the non-agenda public comment or an agenda item is introduced, those who wish to speak should press *9 on their phones to raise their hand, and then staff will inform the callers when it is their turn to speak. When this occurs, the caller will need to press *6 to unmute yourself, and then you can begin. If you begin to comment on an item that is different from the item currently being considered, you will be muted and asked to raise your hand at the correct time. Members of the public will have 3 minutes each to provide their comments. However, if there's a large number of callers who wish to speak on a single agenda item, the comments will be limited to 1 minute each. Members of the public who may also watch the video of today's meeting through the live video streaming available through the Housing Commission's website. Today's agenda included a link to the website for this board meeting where the public can access the streaming of today's meeting. Now, we will now proceed with the non-agenda public comments. As I mentioned, the phone line for today's meeting is 833-548-0276. Callers who wish to provide a non-agenda public comment should press *9 to raise your hand. And this is a time when members of the public may provide comments to the Housing Commission Board about topics that are not on today's agenda, but involve a subject within the Housing Commission's area of responsibility. I will say the Housing Commission cannot take an action on any non-agenda public comments. We did not receive any written non-agenda public comments for today's meeting, but I will now ask our Vice President of Communications, Scott Marshall, if we have any callers on for the non-agenda public comments. Scott?
Thank you, Chair. We did have a hand raised a moment ago, but it has since been lowered. So it appears that we do not. Oh, I apologize. It is back up again. Okay. Caller with a phone number ending in 241. If you can please unmute yourself by pressing *6, you'll have 3 minutes to make your comment. You can go ahead.
Yes. Hello.
I am, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. You proceed.
Yes, hello. I'm a HUD voucher participant. I was rapidly rehoused. I was homeless. I was part of Alpha Project, rapidly rehoused, and a HUD voucher participant. I'm extremely grateful for everyone at HUD and Alpha Project for their tireless work and the work on behalf of HUD. I would like to offer some testimony regarding the reality. When I first moved into the a multi-unit residential location, there was no smoke that was psychoactive substances. And when I say psychoactive, it runs the gamut. It's not just marijuana. It's methamphetamine smoke. It's heroin. It's any kind of turpentine, whatever they can get their hands on. And these are addicts. They smoke nonstop all day, every day. It's to the point where it burns the eyes. It's 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And that has become what is the reality every day now. And when you have medical conditions and your endocrine system can't filter out toxins the way that people who are in their 20s can, it becomes a reality that is very difficult to live with every day. I think part of moving forward, you might want to take comments or provide a forum where people can submit comments regarding behavior-based housing. People who are addicts need their housing, and they need it away from people who are not addicts. That's the reality. They're never going to stop smoking, and they need a place away from people who don't want to be around it. You have Prop 47, police can't do anything about it. They have legalized drugs. They're never going to quit. People like me who cannot be around their smoke, who don't want to inhale it, who cannot inhale it. Mental health consumers like myself who cannot deal with the roller coaster ride that is their psychoactive substance, cannot go on that journey with them every day that is their addict's journey. I'm not denigrating their existence or their journey. However, it is something that is a reality. There are children in my building.
Thank you, Ms.
Yes.
That's the conclusion of the 3 minutes. Thank you for your comment.
Of course, sorry. Yeah, there wasn't a buzzer. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for calling in today and for expressing your sentiments. Scott Marshall, any more hands?
Reality.
There are no other hands raised for non-agenda public comment. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Scott. Now I will ask my fellow commissioners, do any of you have any comments that you would like to make? Okay. Seeing none, I will now go to the next item on our agenda, which is the report from the interim president and CEO, Mr. Jeff Davis. Jeff, take it away.
Good morning, Chair and Commissioners. I do have a few items for you since the last board meeting in November. First of all, I'm very pleased to let the board know that we have been awarded an additional grant to support efforts for more people of color to become homeowners in the city of San Diego. We're coordinating a formal announcement of the grant with the National Fair Housing Alliance, and that announcement is expected later this month. The National Fair Housing Alliance awarded the Inclusive Communities Grant to our nonprofit affiliate, SDHC Building Opportunities Incorporated. The $184,000 grant will provide funds for programs that help households of color prepare for homeownership and/or the purchase of a home. These activities include debt reduction, credit counseling, peer mentors, homeownership navigators, and community educators, as well as down payment and closing cost assistance grants and credit building loans. On Tuesday of this week, the Housing Authority of the City of San Diego approved an onboarding manual for new commissioners. This comprehensive manual is a valuable resource for new commissioners as well as members of the public. It includes details about the Housing Commission, our programs, terminology, and additional matters related to the Housing Commission. We created the manual at the request of the City Council's Select Committee on San Diego Housing Commission's Oversight and Reform. Last November, the committee unanimously recommended that the Housing Authority approve the manual. And the manual is now available on the Board of Commissioners webpage at the Significant Documents section of our website. I do want to thank Committee Chair Stephen Whitburn and the committee members for their recommendations for this manual and their ongoing efforts. I also have an update for you about the multidisciplinary outreach program that this board approved last September as part of ongoing efforts to address homelessness. The Housing Commission contracts with People Assisting the Homeless, or PATH, for this program. About half of the staff positions for this program are now filled. The positions that are taking the longest to fill are the clinical caseworkers. However, PATH anticipates filling the remaining positions by the end of January or early in February. The Housing Commission's Homeless Housing Innovations Division has been meeting with PATH, with the Regional Task Force on Homelessness, with the City Attorney's Office, the San Diego Resource Access Program, meeting with 211, and of course, the San Diego Police Department. These organizations are working closely to identify those experiencing unsheltered homelessness who are high users of the city's crisis response systems. We'll be using a shared set of data to develop a by name list and operating guidelines to prioritize clients through this program. The board is familiar with the Housing Commission's initiatives to address the staffing challenges experienced in the homelessness section. Building and retaining the workforce necessary for this sector was the focus of one of the Housing Commission's collaborative presentations at the Regional Task Force on Homelessness Conference last November here in San Diego. The Housing Commission joined City Council member Marnie Von Wilpert, PATH, and the San Diego Community College District in this panel discussion. This is one of 3 collaborative conference presentations on homelessness solutions that included insight from Housing Commission staff. One additional panel was about the voices of people with lived experience in homelessness and their importance to identifying homelessness solutions. The third presentation focused on emergency housing vouchers to help households experiencing homelessness or those at risk of homelessness. And you'll recall that the Los Angeles Times has published articles online and in print about the Housing Commission's successful utilization of emergency housing vouchers. The website invisiblepeople.tv and a San Francisco Chronicle podcast also have reached out to us to learn more about our success with the emergency housing voucher program. The Housing Commission has also launched a wellness initiative for homelessness service sector staff. This is in collaboration with service provider leadership across the sector. The first event was held in November with over 70 attendees. As the initiative develops, it will include wellness events and presentations, work-related trainings, peer support groups, a digital hub with resources, presentations, and announcements for staff, and collaborative communication about how to implement structural changes to improve workforce capacity. The wellness initiative is part of our broader efforts to address workforce and capacity challenges in the homelessness sector. Our Communications and Government Relations Division is continuing to expand our communications and public outreach initiatives. These support our core value of transparency and the strategic priority area of advocacy, communication, and public engagement in our strategic plan. In December, we built upon the Housing Commission's presence on social media by launching Facebook and Instagram accounts. These are in addition to our LinkedIn account, which launched in November. In the last 2 weeks of December, our social media posts on Facebook and Instagram focused on programs and services available for people experiencing homelessness or at risk of homelessness and how to access these programs. These include the Homelessness Response Center, homelessness shelters, the City of San Diego's Safe Parking Program, the Inclement Weather Shelter Programs, and homelessness prevention programs. This month, we are focusing our social media post on our status as a moving to work agency, the incentives and support available for landlords who rent to our program participants, our rental assistance programs, and our rental assistance waiting list update, which is currently underway. We also have a regular feature known as We're About People Wednesday on the first Wednesday of the month to highlight families that our program assists. And our housing highlight feature each month features the high quality, affordable rental housing properties that we support with financing or rental housing vouchers. And then, of course, we also adjust as needed to provide unplanned social media posts, such as stories on Facebook and Instagram, to raise awareness when inclement weather shelter beds are activated. In the coming months, we will continue to explore ways to maximize our use of social media. Our communications and policy teams also will be working together to identify opportunities for legislative advocacy through letters or op-eds to submit for publication. And these are just a few of our communication and public engagement initiatives. This concludes my report, and thank you all. You're on mute, Chair.
Thank you, Jeff, for that report. I want to commend you and the team for all the work you're doing to increase the transparency. I think that is so important these days. And what we're finding with the growing homeless population is a lot of them are using smartphones. And so your efforts to try and communicate and connect with them every day with credible and important information is truly exemplary. So thank you very much. Next on the agenda is the approval of the minutes from the Housing Commission Board special meeting of November 17th, 2022. Members of the public who wish to comment on the minutes should press *9 to raise their hand. No written public comments were submitted regarding the minutes. Do we have any callers at this time, Scott Marshall?
We do not have any hands raised for comments on the minutes. Thank you.
Okay. This concludes the public comment period for the minutes. Do any of the commissioners wish to make any changes to the minutes, or can someone entertain a motion?
So move.
A motion by Commissioner Hester,
Second.
second by Commissioner Vasquez, I believe. Was it first? And then, okay. We have a motion by Commissioner Hester, second by Commissioner Vasquez to approve the minutes from the Housing Commission Board special meeting of November 17th, 2022. For the record, I will ask each commissioner to say your vote on the motion when I state your name. Vice Chair Klempner.
Aye.
Commissioner Benvenuto.
Aye.
Commissioner Hester.
Aye.
Commissioner Hubbard.
Aye, and I believe it was second by me.
Oh, I apologize, Commissioner Hubbard.
Oh, no, that's okay. Mhm.
Okay, we'll change that. And Commissioner Vasquez.
Aye. Thank you, Commissioner Hester.
Thank you, Commissioner. Thank you, Commissioner Hubbard, for that correction. We will make that change. Commissioners have now voted, all commissioners have voted in favor of the motion, and there are none opposed. I will add my vote in favor of the motion, which now carries unanimously. We will now proceed with the remaining items on today's agenda. The PowerPoint presentations were emailed to the commissioners and are posted on the Housing Commission website. And we will start with item 100, which is the application for State of California CalHome program funds. Members of the public who wish to speak on this item should press *9 on their phones now to raise their hand. We will take public comments after the staff presentation. No written public comments were submitted regarding this item. And we'll start with the Vice President of Single Family Housing and Finance, Suhata Raman, will present this item. Please begin when you are ready.
Good morning, Commissioners, Mr. Davis and others. I am Sujata Raman, the Vice President of Single Family Housing Finance for the San Diego Housing Commission's Real Estate Department. The item before you today is a request recommending the Housing Commission approve the submission of an application up to $5 million in CalHome program funding from the California Department of Housing and Community Development, also known as HCD. Next slide. The California Department of Housing and Community Development issued a Notice of Funding Availability, NOFA, on January 6, 2023. Applications are due February 28, 2023. The Housing Commission intends to apply for the maximum allocation of $5 million in CalHome state funds. Next slide. Funding under this CalHome award will be deployed through the Housing Commission's existing first-time homebuyer program to eligible households earning up to 80% of area median income. This is currently at $104,100 per year for a family of 4. Eligible households will receive a 3% simple interest deferred payment loan of up to 22% of the purchase price, not to exceed $200,000. Please note that this amount of $200,000 on this slide is different from the $100,000 that is stated in the staff report, because the NOFA was issued after the staff report had been completed. To be eligible, the property must be located in the city of San Diego, and the borrowers must meet the Housing Commission's eligibility and underwriting guidelines. The loan will be fully deferred with no payments due until the 30-year maturity date, or if the borrower sells or rents out the property. Next slide. An award of $5 million would benefit approximately 45 to 50 low-income families, with each family receiving an estimated $90,718 in assistance in the form of a deferred payment loan during the purchase of the home. Upon payoff, the principal and interest received are recycled back to the first-time homebuyer program and redeployed to assist additional households. Since 2001, the Housing Commission has received 8 CalHome awards totaling $12.07 million, which has assisted 173 low-income households purchase their first home in the city of San Diego. With CalHome loan repayments, the Housing Commission has assisted 41 additional households using $2.5 million in first-time homebuyer assistance. Next slide. In summary, staff requests that the Housing Commission take the actions detailed in the staff report and shown on this slide. Next slide. That concludes my presentation, and I'm available to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you very much for that presentation. We will now take public comments from callers on this item. Scott Marshall, do we have any callers at this time?
We do not have any callers. Thank you.
All right, this concludes the public comment period for item 100. Commissioners, do you have any questions or comments for Sujata on this item? Perfect. Then seeing none, do we have a motion on this item?
So move. I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion by Commissioner Hester and a second by, was it?
Commissioner Benvenuto.
Benvenuto. Okay, fair enough. I just make sure. Want to get it right.
It wasn't me this time.
Okay, I was like, before I said it, I was like, okay, Commissioner Benvenuto. Okay, so we have a motion by Commissioner Hubbard, a second by Commissioner Benvenuto, and as I state your name, please state your vote for the motion. Vice Chair Klumpner.
Aye.
Commissioner Benvenuto.
Aye.
Commissioner Hester.
Aye.
Commissioner Hubbard.
Aye.
Commissioner Vasquez.
Aye.
Thank you. All commissioners have voted in favor of the motion. I will add my favor and vote of the motion, which means the motion carries unanimously. We will now move. Thank you very much for that discussion. We will now move to item 101. Next on the agenda is the Preliminary Bond Authorization and Tax Equity and Fiscal Responsibility Act, otherwise known as TEFRA, the hearing for Cerro Pueblo. The hearing is now open. Members of the public who wish to speak on this item should press *9 on their phones to raise their hand. We will take public comments after the staff presentation. No written public comments were submitted regarding this item, and we will hear the presentation from Vice President of Multifamily Housing and Finance, Jennifer Coiter. Jennifer, please begin when you are ready.
I should probably unmute myself first before trying to talk. So, good morning, Chair Mitchell and Commissioners. The item before you today is a request to take the initial steps to issue tax-exempt multifamily housing revenue bonds and hold a TEFRA hearing to facilitate the acquisition and rehabilitation of Cerro Pueblo. Next slide, please. Cerro Pueblo is a proposed acquisition and rehabilitation of a 46-unit project, which is made up of 45 affordable units and 1 unrestricted manager unit. The project is located at 2835 Claremont Drive in the Claremont Mesa Community Plan Area, Council District 2. The proposed project's 45 affordable units will be 1-bedroom units. All units must have at least one resident age 62 or older in the household. The units will be restricted to income levels from 30 to 60% of area median income for 55 years. This equates to income levels from $31,250 per year to $62,460 per year for a two-person household. Site amenities will include on-site supportive services, a laundry room, a community room, and a leasing office. Next slide, please. The developer, RAD Group, is an experienced developer and has successfully issued multifamily housing revenue bonds with the city or the Housing Authority of the City of San Diego in the past. Services for the tenants will be provided by Catholic Charities and will include access to healthcare and mental health services, as well as in-home and long-term care planning. Next slide. This slide shows the site map of the development. It is located just east of Interstate 5 at 2835 Claremont Drive in the Claremont Mesa Community Plan Area, Council District 2. There are several bus stops nearby, with the closest being 100 feet away. Next slide, please. The total development cost of the project will be approximately $17.4 million, which equates to a per unit cost of approximately $378,000. Sources of funding will be made up of a bond finance, permanent loan, deferred developer fee, and tax credits. Next slide, please. Units were restricted to 30 to 60% of area median income for 55 years. Rents will range from $732 to $1,464 per month. Cerro Pueblo is currently under a HUD-HAP contract, which assists residents with the rental amounts listed. Next slide, please. Should this be approved today, the developer will apply to SIDLAC for a bond allocation in May 2023. Should the developer receive an award of bonds, we anticipate bringing this item back for final bond-related approvals in November 2023. At this time, in addition to the Housing Commission Board approval, the project will also be brought before the Housing Authority for approval. The developer expects to close construction financing and begin construction in early 2024 and complete rehabilitation later that year. Next slide, please. Here's the photo of the property in its current state. Next slide, please. You are considering approvals to take the preliminary steps to issue up to $13 million in tax-exempt multifamily housing revenue bonds. Approval of bond issuance and Tax Equity and Fiscal Responsibility Act, TEFRA, resolution does not commit the Housing Authority to issue bonds. The bonds will not constitute a debt of the city. If bonds are ultimately issued for the project, the bonds will not financially obligate the city, the Housing Authority, or the Housing Commission, because security for the repayment of the bonds will be limited to specific private revenue sources of the project. Staff recommends that the board take the actions detailed in the staff report and shown on the following slides. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Next slide. This concludes the presentation. Representatives from the developer and I are available to answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jennifer, for that presentation. We will now take any public comments from callers on this item. Scott Marshall, do we have any public comments?
There are no hands raised for public comment on this item. Thank you.
Good. This concludes the public comment period for item 101. My fellow commissioners, do you have any questions, comments, or concerns that you want to raise? Seeing none, then, oh, sorry, I see a hand. Good. That makes it easy. First hand, Vice Chair Klumpner.
I live in the same general neighborhood as the site, so I'm very familiar with it. I've driven past it many times. This is a great location. Claremont needs as much affordable housing as we can get. And so I just want to thank staff for their work on this, and hopefully we see final approval.
Thank you very much, Vice Chair Klumpner. Commissioner Vasquez, I saw your hand up as well. You're on mute.
Sorry. So I noticed that we just have a 5-year restriction for the 55 and up. Is there a reason why it wasn't able to be longer than that? Because of the issue with us being in an affordable housing crisis, especially for people on fixed income.
Well, I can start it, and then I see that Colin Rice from the developer is on this too, and so he can probably back up with whatever in additional information. So the HAP HUD contract is directly through HUD, and it is expiring within 5 years. But with these affordable housing, the SIDLAC application, we're hoping to, get the restrictions extended for 55 years. So instead of it converting to market, the SIDLAC application and approval will allow the restrictions to continue for 55 years. But I'll let Colin Rice, if he has additional information that he'd like to provide.
Sure. Hi to everybody. A special hello to Chairman Mitchell. Nice to see you again.
Very nice to see you, my friend. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you very much. Thanks for your time on this board. And thank you to Colin Miller and Jennifer and everybody that, Matt and everybody that played a role in this project. We, as you guys know, the developer and the Housing Commission always work hand in hand on these projects. So thank you very much for your partnership and support. As to Chairperson Vasquez, or excuse me, Commissioner Vasquez question. Yeah, when we took over the project, so we actually already own the project. We bought it on December 1st, and we're refinancing it with tax credits and bonds. When we came upon the project, it had a year-by-year HAP contract that was about to expire. In fact, it was probably weeks, maybe even days from actually expiring when we closed the project. And so we kind of saved it at the last moment from losing its subsidy and its low income status. At the time of our closing, we also submitted for a 5-year markup to market, which we anticipate getting any month now. But the real reason why we didn't get a longer term HAP contract is because, Jennifer kind of hinted at this, is because the rules out of the Treasurer's office to receive tax credits and bonds actually, for kind of odd reasons, disincentivizes long-term HAP contracts at the time of an application, because if a project is not considered to be at risk, then it scores lower in the process. It becomes less likely to receive the allocation of tax credits and bonds. So our preference would have been to submit for a 20-year HAP contract, but that would have hurt our tax credit and bond process. And so we applied for a 5-year, which is still considered to be at risk. So we get a 5-year HAP contract in the next couple of months. And then in conjunction with our tax credit and bond application, the one that we're working on now today with the Housing Commission, then we will also get a new 20-year HAP contract, and the project will be preserved for the long term.
Can I ask a follow-up question,
Yes,
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
So it's your position that it's going to be extended to a 20-year after the bond is completed. Will it also still qualify for what Ms. Kruder stated, that it would be a 55, it could be a 55-year restriction as well, or is it just going to be the 20?
It'll be both of those. There'll be 2 layers of protection for the residents and for the community.
Yeah, once the bonds are issued and we enter into the regulatory agreements, the 55 years will be in place.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate the clarification.
Thank you very much for that clarification. Any further questions from my fellow commissioners? All right, I will say that we had a chance to discuss this project, and Commissioner Vasquez, I appreciated your questions because it was confusing for me. And I think Mr. Davis actually shows great patience with my questions. So Jennifer and the team, congrats to you guys for bringing this forward. All right, if there are no further questions, do I have a motion on this item?
So moved.
A motion by Vice Chair Klempner, second. Is there a second? Second by Commissioner Benvenuto. Okay, so as I say your name, please state your vote for the motion. Vice Chair Klempner.
Aye.
Commissioner Benvenuto.
Aye.
Commissioner Hester.
Aye.
Commissioner Hubbard.
Aye.
Commissioner Vasquez.
Aye.
All right, all commissioners have voted in favor of the motion, and I will add my aye vote in favor of the motion, which means the motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much for your work on this by the entire team. Next item up is item 102, and this is an informational workshop about the fiscal year 2024 moving to work annual plan. And members of the public who wish to speak on this item should press *9 on their phones to raise their hand. We will take public comments after the staff presentation. No written public comments were submitted regarding this item. Our interim CEO, Jeff Davis, will be introducing this item. And before he begins, I will say to my fellow commissioners, I've had a chance to look at this and listen to this, and it is complicated, but I think the team has done a really good job of trying to lay it out. So with that, Jeff Davis, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. So the federal Moving to Work demonstration program is an essential component of the Housing Commission's ongoing efforts to provide housing assistance for families with low income and those experiencing homelessness in the city. These are the families who need help the most in this competitive, very high cost San Diego rental housing market. Historically, our Moving to Work initiatives have included efforts to achieve greater efficiencies, and these contribute to our ability to maximize the positive impact that we have in the city of San Diego. Many of the larger public housing agencies across the country continue to see the growing demand for assistance without sufficient federal resources to meet that demand. And this is particularly true in coastal cities, and it's very much the case for us at the San Diego Housing Commission. Nationwide, only 1 in 4 households that qualify for rental assistance actually receive it. Here in San Diego, our rental assistance waiting list is currently 132,000 households, and it grows each month. And meanwhile, as you are well aware, rental costs in San Diego continue to increase significantly. And what this requires is that the Housing Commission conduct careful balancing and make some difficult choices. We make these decisions so that the Housing Commission can assist as many households as possible, while also providing enough rental assistance for families with our competitive payment standards. And what this allows is that the families that we do serve have the opportunity to choose to live in neighborhoods across the city that make the most sense for themselves and their families. This morning, we're discussing proposed updates to further enhance our efficiency with our Moving to Work initiatives. The proposed updates will result in cost savings that can then be applied to implement higher payment standards for our participants. At the same time, the proposals you will hear include steps to minimize any potential adverse impact that these changes may have on households that might experience a change. We remain committed to our mission to foster social and economic stability for vulnerable populations in the city of San Diego through quality, affordable housing, opportunities for financial self-reliance, and homelessness solutions. We're guided by our core values, which include serving our clients with equity, with dignity and respect. So I'm now going to ask Lisa and Nancy to present the fiscal year 2024 Moving to Work annual plan.
Good morning, Chair Mitchell and Commissioners. I'm Lisa Jones, Executive Vice President of Strategic Initiatives, and with me this morning is Nancy Saw, our Strategic Programs Manager. This morning's workshop will review the draft fiscal year 2024 Moving to Work annual plan, which runs from July 1st, 2023 to June 30th, 2024. Every year, we engage the Board of Commissioners in a workshop to request comments and feedback on our Moving to Work initiatives to be submitted to the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, or HUD. We'll return at the next board meeting in February with a recommendation for the board to approve the plan for submission to HUD. Next slide, please. Moving to Work is a demonstration program for public housing authorities that provides housing authorities the opportunity to design innovative, cost-effective strategies that better meet local needs. Moving to Work activities must meet 3 statutory objectives, which are to reduce costs in federal expenditures, help families become more economically self-sufficient. In San Diego, this is focused on families that are able to work, and improve housing choices for low-income families. In addition, Moving to Work agencies must assist substantially the same total number of eligible low-income households as would have been served if the Housing Authority had not received an MTW designation. The Housing Commission is one of 39 original MTW agencies out of approximately 3,200 public housing authorities nationwide. There are now a total of 126 agencies that have received MTW status, either under the original agreement with HUD or through an expansion cohort. Next slide, please. This slide lists a few examples of how our moving to work designation has provided the Housing Commission opportunities to design programs better suited to meet local needs. Several of the programs in our homelessness action plan, Housing First San Diego, are moving to work initiatives. These include Moving Home Rapid Rehousing, the Moving On Rental Assistance Program, and the Monarch School and Guardian Scholars programs. We also implemented locally designed programs like our sponsor-based subsidy program, which pairs rental assistance with supportive services to specifically assist people experiencing homelessness. Moving to work flexibility also enabled the Housing Commission to create the Achievement Academy to help families attain self-sufficiency. The Achievement Academy is a learning and resource center available at no cost for individuals and families with low income in the city of San Diego. Their programs emphasize career planning, job skills, job placement, and personal financial education to help individuals and families become more financially self-reliant. We also use our MTW flexibility to create and preserve affordable rental housing. For example, the Housing Commission has invested moving to work funds toward acquiring properties such as Village North Senior Garden Apartments and maintaining our existing properties to ensure that our properties remain in good condition long-term. Next slide, please. For the fiscal year 2024 Moving to Work annual plan, we are reproposing two existing activities to incorporate updates: our Path to Success and Moving Home Rapid Rehousing initiatives. Path to Success is the Housing Commission's comprehensive rent reform initiative. It encourages work-able housing choice voucher rental assistance families to become more financially self-reliant. Path to Success modifies the method the Housing Commission uses to determine the portion of the monthly contract rent that rental assistance families and public housing residents pay in order to encourage families to increase earnings. Work-able families pay either a minimum monthly rent payment or a predetermined amount of rent based on the family's annual income, whichever is greater. Adjusted annual income is separated into income ranges. The lower edge of the range is used to calculate the family's portion of the rent at 30% of the adjusted monthly income. For example, the monthly rent payment amount for a family earning $25,000 to $29,999 is calculated using $25,000 as the income. This allows work-able families to increase their income within that income band without being penalized and to allocate more of their money to other financial goals. We are proposing the following updates to the Path to Success initiative: removing medical allowance deductions, modifying the household age designation, and removing utility allowances. Next slide, please.
Eligible households may receive an allowance for unreimbursed medical expenses. The allowance is given when calculating adjusted income for medical expenses. The existing allowable medical assistance expenses are categorized into bands with deductions. Currently, only 1% or 129 of all Path to Success households are receiving a medical allowance. Of the 802 households who requested a medical allowance, 84% or 673 housing to remove medical allowances to reduce administrative burden and utilize federal funds more efficiently. Households who are currently receiving a medical allowance will continue to receive the same allowance for as long as they are eligible in order to prevent hardship. A hardship policy will also be created for households with medical expenses over $10,000. Next slide, please. Under Path to Success, the Housing Commission identifies rental assistance households and public housing residents as either work-abled or elderly or disabled. Households determined to be elderly or disabled family are households in which every adult is 55 years or older, has a disability, or is a full-time student between 18 to 23 years old. The Housing Commission is proposing to modify the definition of elderly to align with HUD's definition of an elderly person. Under this proposal, identifying a household as elderly or disabled would require all adults to be either 62 or older, have a disability, or be a full-time student between 18 to 23 years old. Nationally, an increasing number of households 55 years of age or older are still working. According to the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics, employment for this group has increased 22% from 2012 to 2022. This proposed modification will encourage continued employment for households that HUD considers non-elderly. There will be no immediate impact on work-able households. However, an impact analysis reviewed current work-able households who are between 50 and 54 years old. This analysis projected the change in rent portion for these households at the elderly or disabled total tenant payment or TTP calculation. The analysis projected that 61% or 505 households would have experienced a decrease in the portion they paid toward their rent, and 39% or 325 households would have experienced an increase in their rent portion. However, this analysis does not capture the impact from the possibility of other changes that normally occur, such as fluctuations in household income, changes in household composition, and increases in payment standards. Next slide, please. Current elderly or disabled households who are between the ages of 55 and 61 and are not disabled would be identified as work-able households. Less than 550 households are in this category. The impact analysis for households in this group utilized the minimum rent for work-able households to review potential impact. Based on this approach, the analysis projected that 61% or 328 households would experience an increase less than $100 per month in their portion of the rent, and 39% or just over 200 households would experience an increase greater than $100. This projection does not take into consideration that households who are 61 years old will likely remain an elderly household by the time the policy change is implemented. Due to the income ranges that apply to workable households and the possibility of other changes that normally occur, such as fluctuations in household income, changes in household composition, and increases in payment standards, it's not possible to predict the actual income once this change is implemented. The Housing Commission will apply a hardship policy similar to hardship policies that we have utilized for other activities and HUD has approved in the past. Households who will experience an increase greater than $50 in their portion of the rent as a result of this policy may receive a one-year exemption. The Housing Commission will also conduct significant outreach to households to ensure everyone is aware of the pending modifications. The outreach will also include information on how to access the Housing Commission's Achievement Academy. Next slide, please. The Housing Commission is also proposing to eliminate utility reimbursement payments and corresponding reporting requirements. This will achieve greater cost effectiveness, administrative efficiencies, and flexibility to improve housing choice and federal expenditures. The removal of utility allowances will simplify the housing assistance payment and tenant rent calculations. Utility allowances are often difficult to explain to property owners and clients and often result in frustration when the methodology is misunderstood, which may limit housing choice options. The table on this slide is an analysis that shows the impact of this change to household rent portion for all Path to Success households. The analysis projected that 30% or 3,940 households will experience no change to their portion of the rent, and 70% or 9,025 households will experience an increase to their portion of rent. Of the households who will experience an increase, 53% or 6,818 households will experience an increase less than $50 per month. Households who will experience an increase greater than $50 in their rent portion as a result of this policy may receive a one-year exemption and have access to the existing hardship policies that we have utilized for other activities and HUD has approved in the past. The potential housing assistance payment savings that would result from this update are projected to be approximately $5.3 million annually. This does not take into consideration other changes that normally occur and can affect the annual housing assistance payment expenditure, such as fluctuations in household income, changes in household compositions, and updates to payment standards. The savings experienced from removing utility reimbursement payments will provide greater flexibility by allowing more funds to be allocated toward voucher payment standards. For the proposed modifications to Path to Success, the Housing Commission will conduct significant outreach to all households to ensure everyone is aware of the pending modifications before they are implemented. The outreach will include information on how to access the Achievement Academy and any available utility assistance programs for low-income households. Next slide, please. The Housing Commission is also proposing modifications to its Moving Home Rapid Rehousing Initiative. Moving Home is one of the Housing Commission's Housing First San Diego initiatives. It utilizes moving to work funds to provide housing subsidies to individuals and households experiencing homelessness, while supportive services are provided to strengthen stabilization. The Moving Home program provides rental subsidies for households up to 24 months. An extension up to 36 months is possible in exceptional circumstances. The program also provides case management to help households develop an individualized housing and services plan, including increasing household income and leveraging community resources. Next slide, please. The Housing Commission has been a leader locally on homelessness prevention efforts since launching its locally funded programs in 2017 for households at imminent risk of homelessness. At a local and national level, we have seen an increased focus on the critical need to reduce inflow into the homelessness response system and identify effective ways to keep households from losing their existing housing. This proposed modification would expand Moving Home to encompass a rapid stabilization component for households experiencing significant housing instability, who are highly vulnerable to losing their housing. With housing assistance and supportive services, these households could be expected to stabilize and pay full rent on their own within 6 to 24 months. This modification would move away from an antiquated approach of a fail-first model that requires households to become literally homeless before they can access higher-level intervention resources, such as rapid rehousing. This expansion of Moving Home will utilize the same principles and best practices of rapid rehousing programs, providing rental assistance and supportive services tailored to meet the household's needs, and only providing the support necessary to stabilize the household, providing rental assistance that can be adjusted over time, with the outcome of the household stabilizing over the length of the program and able to pay the full rent by program exit. Next slide. This concludes our presentation, and we are available for any questions or comments you may have. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that presentation. We will now take any public comments from callers on this item. Scott Marshall, do we have any public comment?
We do not. Thank you.
All right, this concludes the public comment period for item 102. Commissioners, I'm assuming there are some questions. Commissioner Benvenuto, I see your hand up.
Thanks. Yeah, thank you for the presentation. That was great. I have a couple questions. Let's start with that medical hardship. I can appreciate the administrative side and how we got to this proposal. Being completely frank, I'm not sure that I agree that it makes sense to do away with that and then create a policy with create a newer policy for households with medical expenses over 10,000. I'd like to ask if we've thought about reviewing the way we communicate about medical allowances, because if the problem is we're spending a boatload of administrative time for not many folks who are using it, right? 802 requests versus 129 receiving. I get that. That's way more people you're telling no to. But have we thought about revisiting how we communicate it so that it's more easily understood by folks who would know, okay, I'm not going to qualify, I'm not going to apply, and then take up the resources of the commission to do the review versus not allowing it? And then additionally, is that 802 v 129 number this past calendar year or in the totality that the allowance has existed?
Lisa, you're on mute.
No, she's off mute.
Off mute. How can
Oh, there you go.
Okay, I was getting some feedback that my mic wasn't working very well, so I've pulled a new mic in. Sorry about that. Hopefully this sounds better.
100% better, Lisa. We can all
Great.
attest.
Sorry about that earlier. So no, we didn't go back to the length that the medical allowance has existed. That would be going back for as long as we have been in existence, frankly, as a housing commission. We did look to Nancy, if you can share the time range that we looked at. This is pretty common. We do have Azucena Valladolid here as well, who oversees the rental assistance division. The numbers being at 1% actually being eligible is a pretty common standard. It's very low and it's not a well-used allowance, not just for us, but also nationally. Frankly, a lot of other MTW agencies have already eliminated this allowance because it's administratively burdensome. And with the Path to Success comprehensive hardship, there's another way to capture hardship that households are having. And frankly, sometimes the household is experiencing a hardship that might not align with the medical allowance, but that's what they're applying for. Having the Path to Success comprehensive hardship, regardless of what the actual generator or of that hardship is, really still gives us the opportunity to make sure that a household that maybe should be a disabled household and is not a disabled household currently, that review is happening regardless. So when looking at sort of what our practices are that are in place today, we think that there's a strong hardship policy in place to capture those where that might have fallen through the cracks and frankly might actually need a different type of hardship than say a medical allowance would even give. So that's kind of how we looked at it in the approach, and then grandfathering in the folks that are already in so that we are not impacting folks with existing hardships.
Okay, thank you. That makes sense. I can appreciate that. I would say as a follow on to that, and thank you. I better appreciate the rationale here. One thing I'd ask, if possible, to lower, if there is hardship policy created for households, it already exists, or we're proposing a different hardship policy to come online for medical expenses?
So we have the comprehensive hardship policy for the Path to Success program, which basically means any type of hardship a family might feel that they are experiencing, they can bring that situation forward and ask for a review. And there's an independent review panel that actually reviews those decisions. So there's sort of several checks and balances in that process. That already exists. The hardship policy specifically for the change to this activity is to grandfather in everybody that's there, allow for folks with medical costs over 10,000 that we would still have a hardship policy for them, and then anybody else that falls under that 10,000 would access the comprehensive hardship policy that already exists.
Gotcha. Okay.
So Lisa, I want to be clear that everybody listening is, so everybody that's in the policy, in the program now will be grandfathered in and will continue.
Yes.
$0 to $9,999. There's one focus that will be a review that they could, the comprehensive.
There is an opportunity for them to be reviewed under the comprehensive hardship policy. It might actually be that the medical allowance isn't the issue. It might be that they actually should be considered a disabled family. And sometimes folks have disabilities that are not recognized by SSDI, Social Security Administration, but that their medical professionals would, right? So we have what we consider fragile households. Yeah, there's an opportunity for review. So to some degree, I think this makes, I would say, a more clear opportunity to look at it across the board as opposed to just sort of categorize them into that one. For folks that do have 10,000 or plus in medical allowances, then we can still apply that hardship policy that's referenced in the plan.
Okay, I just make sure we're clear on that. All right, Vice Chair Klempner.
Oh, sorry, I am not done.
Commissioner Benvenuto, I want to apologize. I thought you were finished. You had that look of, okay, that's.
No, I get that look when people say a lot of numbers at me. So I would encourage staff and even this group to rethink the 10,000 number. To me, that feels very high, and I can appreciate that there are still steps below that. But for a special medical exemption, I mean, the fragility of the nature of the people we're working with. That's my take on that. That's that hardship policy specific to the medical expense. But moving on to another piece of it, the utility reimbursement. So I'm guessing that this is sort of similar to the medical allowance in that it's sort of like a legacy thing. And as we've gotten more comprehensive in dealing with people holistically and in a more organic sense, we recognize what works and what doesn't work. However, and maybe this is a question for the chair actually, as are the folks who now will be moved away from being able to use the reimbursement payment and utility allowance, are we just throwing them into free market with the uncertainty of what utility bills may be in coming years, right? I think we can all appreciate the nature of those payments increasing. will our clients now be also subject to the whims of the market?
So, I mean, frankly, our utility allowance comes nowhere near what actual utility expenses are. It's to some degree the way the voucher program is written at a federal level, the way it's regulated, it's like a token, right? It's not
okay.
as though, you know, we're looking at average cost of electric is $230 a month and you're getting a $230 a month allowance. In fact, when you look at the number of folks, the 80% that see an increase of less than $50, that tells you how limited and minimal the utility allowance actually is, right? It's not offsetting to any real way what the actual costs are, but what taking those savings and any savings that we can find and pushing them towards payment standards does is it allows folks to search for the best unit to meet their needs. And maybe that is a unit where all the majority of utilities are paid for, as an example. But our payment standards are really our most powerful tool in giving people housing choice across the city. So, and this is another one, frankly, that many MTW agencies have already eliminated or made significant modification to, because it's very confusing for our tenants, very confusing for landlords, and it doesn't actually give a one-for-one offset of what utilities really cost.
Okay.
And Commissioner Benvenuto, I will add what Lisa just said. I think your question is a good one. I asked this question of the team prior to this meeting because of what's happening in the space on utility cost. What I do believe we have to be better about as an agency is connecting everybody that is depending on the commission for resources of this nature to all of the information that is available. One of the things that I realize is that we can be a better conduit for information, like LIHEAP, for example. You know, for people who are struggling with utility costs, LIHEAP comes into place, neighbor to neighbor. Those are things that we can be better about. But I get your question, Mr. Benvenuto, and I did have the same concern because there are a lot of things happening that are out of the control of both the customer as well as the utilities as it relates to cost increases, both on gas, electric, water, at all.
Well, and Chair Mitchell, you bring up a good point. One of the things that we do when we make these kind of updates is we go through a comprehensive sort of planning strategy around what the communication out will be to our clients. And as an agency that is communicating with both folks that we serve and folks that connect with us, but we don't directly serve, access to community resources and those resources that are out there to offset those kind of things are probably much more powerful tools than sort of the minimal amount that our utility allowance offsets for our customers, right? So that's really something that's going to be important as this process and the communication rolls out, and also utilizing and leveraging the Achievement Academy and our housing specialists to make sure that we're pushing that information out when we're interacting with people, even if it comes to helping folks with applications.
Thank you. I'll cop to the fact that I approached that slide and that information from the opposite piece. So I misunderstood thank you for all I'll own that. That makes a lot more sense than where my head was going. And then my final comment is just on the moving home rapid stabilization piece. I think that's fantastic. And the more resources we can move that direction, I'm very, very supportive of. But that ends my spiel. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Commissioner Benvenuto. Commissioner Vice Chair Klempner.
Thank you very much. Apologize everybody for my nasal this morning. I'm sick. And also any long pauses. That's just me trying to remember where I was in my sentence. Couple things. I thank you for this presentation, and I think the moving to work applicate or our plan really kind of gets to the core of what makes this work difficult in some ways, in the sense that it is the most like granular forced choices of, you know, what types of assistance we provide to whom and what we don't and why, and all of those things that go with, you know, administering limited resources. I don't think we see anything that gets more granular than this document. And I appreciate the staff time that goes into preparing this. I appreciate that every year we're looking at ways to improve this, to administer the assistance more efficiently. and not keep coasting off of what we've done before, but looking for ways to improve it. I think that's incredibly important. And as I sort of look at these two, the other thing that jumps out to me is just how complicated it is to administer these programs and the level of expertise that comes into our rank and file staff that are helping people figure out what they do and do not qualify for, and what has changed and what has not. And so all of that's kind of a long-winded way of saying that we are always dealing with trade-offs that are not super comfortable in terms of do we have this program for medical hardships, or do we add it to the change the payment standards? And then just for the benefit of anybody in the public or other policymakers watching this, in my mind, and I'd like staff to kind of tell me if I'm thinking about this correctly, at the core of all of this, it really kind of comes down to, with rental rates rising, how much can we afford to give any individual household that qualifies for assistance in order to make them as competitive in the marketplace as possible so they can utilize that voucher, versus how much do we have specific targeted programs for certain types of circumstances. And of course, we would all love to have both of those things be possible. But in the past year, I saw John Oliver did a story where his show went out and talked to people who, it was in a different city, I want to say Philadelphia or somewhere, who had been on a waiting list, qualified for a voucher, and then went to work trying to utilize it, and went through dozens of rejections from landlords where they would accept the voucher in a place where they don't have to, but they either had no vacancy or the market rate had become so high that the voucher no longer covered it. And so what it was sort of showing on the ground level was what happens in a community when, even if you have the voucher, you have no way to utilize the voucher because nobody's accepting it because the prices are too high and the voucher rate, the reimbursement rate, is too low. And that's essentially what this is all about, us avoiding. Am I thinking about this correctly? Like, this is about us making sure that people's voucher that they're taking to a landlord covers the cost of rent so that they can find somebody to rent to them.
I mean, I would say, yes, that's definitely absolutely one of the core focuses. And our EHV success is a perfect example of that, right? We were successful with EHV because we have competitive payment standards, we have strong landlord engagement, we have really strong housing specialists that understand the complexities of the work. But those payment standards and that landlord engagement really are what made the difference. Our CEO obviously would like to weigh in.
Yeah, thank you, Lisa, and thank you, Vice Chair. I think you really nailed it. And I think the bottom line here is that, as everyone here knows, the rents in the San Diego area for the last couple of years have been rising dramatically. The funding that the Housing Commission receives to help pay those rents is rising marginally at best. And so we need to find the most painless ways that we can to be able to find funding that we can then use to raise our payment standards so that our families have all the choices that any other family would have when they are renting a unit. If we don't make these changes, we don't make these hard choices, our families will be left to rent the least desirable units in the least desirable areas. And that's what we're trying to avoid through these hard choices. The only other thing I might add is, in better days, we did make a decision to lower the percentage that an elderly disabled household pays for the rent from 30% to 28.5%. So that sort of should also help mitigate some of these later decisions that we've had to make.
I appreciate that detail, and that's kind of the second thing that I'm thinking about. Here, the first being like, kind of what are the big picture problems that we're trying to work on here, and those payment standards seem to be, as technical as it is, it seems to be a really important thing that everybody should understand, that it is possible, and we need to make sure that we do not end up in a situation where a voucher just doesn't really get a lot of people housed. And that's kind of the worst case scenario. And then the painlessness, I'm glad you kind of put it as, you know, how painlessly we kind of make these changes. And as I'm sort of tracking these changes that are being made, the majority, I mean, vast majority of households are going to have no change at all, right? Because even, for example, those utilizing the medical hardship, they're grandfathered in. And so this is mostly prospective. But can you explain, because there will be some households where there will be changes, and it seems like it's mostly on the utility, and I have a comment on the utility part too. But let's say that you are a client and there is going to be a change. When do you find out how many of them, how does that go into effect? Does everybody, you know, have the change hit them all at the same time, you know, via mailed notice? Or can you kind of explain if something is changing in your household?
So we can, so to kind of give an idea, so the utility allowances affect everybody, right? So that's a large number of households. That's over 13,000 MTW households that we support, that the utility allowances would impact. But we go through a recertification process. So there's a couple different ways we can notice. We can notice everybody at once, which has a lot of administrative efficiencies, and also it has a lot of efficiencies in communication, because we are getting all of that communication out. We are sort of prepared. We have all our staff trained. We can bring in additional resources if we need to. We can communicate with our community-based organizations, talk about the resources that are available for utility allowance help. But 30% of those households will see no change at all. Just over 50% will see a change of less than $50. We do have the hardship that we've put in place that if a household sees a change of $50 or greater, they can receive up to a 1-year exemption from that change. So that would give them time to adjust for that. And we can also help with those applications to the other community resources. So we can do it more than one way, but doing it all in once creates a lot of efficiency of focus and sort of training around staff, you know, and also our CBOs all at the same time. If we go through a recertification process, by the time we do 2 years worth of recertifications, working 3 to 4 months ahead, and potentially a 1-year extension, it could take us 3.5 to 4 years to roll out this process. So,
and then just to put a fine point on the communication versus the recertification area, when we're talking about the communication, this is, you know, informing people of these changes that are going to take place. The recertification is when the change actually takes place, and that does not occur all at once, correct? Or I guess not when the change takes place, but when the change goes into effect with a given household.
We can do it more than one way. So we could do it through a recertification process, which would be over a 2-year recertification plus 1-year noticing, which could end up being a 3.5 to 4 year process. Or we could actually do it all at once and do a long-term sort of strategy of communication, then noticing, then exemption, which would probably take us about 2 years. And to some degree, I think from a communication and training and consistency standpoint, would probably be better customer service to our residents, because we're sort of really ramping up to do that appropriately. But there's 2 different ways we could roll it out. The recommendation that we would make is probably to do it all at once, but we can also bring that final recommendation back when we bring the final plan back for approval in February.
Okay, thank you. And then in terms of those 2 options, so the advantage of doing it all at once is administrative efficiency. And it sounds like this also would give most families like a longer notice in terms of they know that the changes are coming with a longer runway before they actually take effect, versus on the recertification, the advantage being that we're essentially doing 1/24 of the clients are being updated each month. And so they may have some more questions. There may be, you know, they may be applying for that 1-year extension, et cetera, but we're sort of doing it in little tranches. So that
more slowly. You know, partners may forget that we've communicated out on this over a 2.5 to 3 year period. The resources that are available for help with utilities might change over that time. So I think there's two things to doing it sort of all at once with a proper noticing period and communication plan. Is that everybody is on the same page and focused on this, and we know what the resources are within the community. Doing it over a 3.5 year period through recertification could mean that we kind of lose, you know, it's just a long period of time to try to maintain all of that training for staff turnover, for different community-based organizations, for resources that change. So our recommendation would probably be to do a communication strategy, give the 1-year notice and go through that process and do it all at
Okay.
once.
And then Jeff, you have something here?
Yeah, I guess just to further complicate things, I just want to, note that when a family is recertified, there are a number of things that we look at that could impact their rent portion. Some of them may be, have a negative impact on their rent portion, like what we're talking about, but there are also positive things. We raise our payment standards every year. Those are only applied at recertification. So because our payment standards will always be higher at their recert than they were at their last recert, that actually has a positive, or can have a positive impact on their rent portion, and again, mitigate some of these changes. I hope that made sense.
Got it. Yeah. And so just the purpose of all, in terms of how this is implemented, this is all with the aim of basically reducing any added burden to any particular household, giving people ample time to know that any change is coming so that they can make adjustments to their household. All those kinds of things. I appreciate that, and I think we all have the same thing in mind here. Kind of my last point on this is the administrative efficiency. The more I learn about how these things are administered, that really does seem like an important piece of this, because obviously we all want as much of the resources we have available as possible going to the people who need it the most, and only kind of what's needed to administer it properly and make sure it's going to the appropriate people and the right, all that kind of stuff. But the utility discussion is really interesting to me, because obviously this is an increasing concern in terms of share of household income and the burden. But and you kind of answer a lot of my questions. I mean, as I think about that, one of the things that was sort of running through my head was, do all landlords even split utilities with their tenants the same way? I'm trying to remember back to like various rentals I've been in. It seems like no. I mean, like there's certain ones that you can kind of reliably,
there are some that
water
are
is not
that are
metered
master
by
metered.
unit, but
Yeah, some are master metered and a lot aren't.
It's all over the place. Yeah.
So that, I mean, as soon as we start thinking about, so that makes a lot of sense to me, that we would want to be getting out of the business of, which frankly cannot, I mean, it just seems like it is impossible for that type of assistance to be administered perfectly equitably, because people are in such different circumstances in terms of who's actually paying what utility. And so it seems like it makes a lot more sense for us to put that back into the payment standards, so that everybody gets a little boost, I guess. Am I thinking about this correctly? Everybody gets a little boost that helps cover some of those things without us spending some of that money in the process trying to sort out all these complex little details, like on a case-by-case basis. Is that kind of the staff thinking here?
That's a good way to capture it. Yeah.
Okay. So just want to make sure I was understanding that correct. So I mean, again, I guess my only comment on that is, I certainly like share some heartburn about any sort of reduction in any type of assistance here, but it seems like the positive trade-offs are very strong, in that we're administering more of the funds directly to the households. We're reducing our administrative costs in the process. We're making it more efficient. And, as the resources are being plowed back into assisting clients in one way or another, then, that kind of makes it easier to see one type of assistance reduce or go away, because it's to the benefit of other types of assistance. So thank you.
Chair Stack, please.
Yes, Commissioner Hester.
Hi. Thank you for this presentation. I think it's coming together now in my mind what this actually is. From a client's perspective, the eligibility, because you're talking about recertifying folks, is there a chance for any of them to lose their certification, for instance? Or there's none? Okay,
that wouldn't be related to any of these changes at all. The recertification that we do every 2 years really just looks at someone's income eligibility for the program, and whether or not they've increased income, decreased income, whether or not their household circumstances have changed, that kind of thing. But no, it doesn't, we're not looking to see if someone is eligible for the program again. Not at all.
Okay.
Well, it's a good question, though. I think Commissioner Klumpner was kind of, if you determine when going through this process that someone is making, their household income is $80,000 a year, you then have to take action.
Well, yes, I mean, they would be responsible for reporting that type of change. And like if their household income went up $30,000, like there's a process for that, right? But we look at income during the recertification periods. We don't necessarily look at it in between. Azucena, do you want to explain sort of
that makes sense. At least I think that's a question which says, if you're looking at the income during the recertification and someone had, you discover that they're making a lot more money, then there would be a change in their status.
If I could interject here, what we do at the recertification, as Lisa pointed out, is we look at their income, we look at their household circumstances, and then we do a calculation to determine what their rent portion should be. If their income has increased to the point where 30% of their income is now equal to their rent, there's no more assistance for us to provide. And so what we do is we put them on what we call a zero HAP, a 6 month
runway.
So for 6 months, if their circumstances change, then they may become eligible again. But if not, then they're paying their full rent. And so there's no more assistance for us to provide, and they are terminated from the program.
Yeah, I think that's what I was hearing Commissioner Hester's question. So if you discover that someone's rent, their salary is 30% of can pay 30, it exceeds, or how did you phrase it, Jeff? Is
their tenant rent portion equals the contract rent. So they're basically paying their income is so significant that their calculation shows that they would be paying the whole rent. So there would be no housing assistance to pay.
Yeah. And they have 6 months, they'll have a 6 month runway before the HAP stops.
But that's currently happening now. That's currently the system in place, right?
That's the
current. We're talking about, that's right. So we're talking about the 13,000 population here that we are servicing. And I like what we're doing in terms of like no longer just medical expenses, but a hardship qualification. I think that makes sense to me because as for the reasons articulated earlier, I wanted to understand a little bit more so people qualify, the population that we're talking about, they qualify for this program, on different times. And so is eligibility monthly, or is eligibility annually or biannual, or can you talk a little bit about that?
So when someone comes onto the program for the first time, we go through the eligibility process. We look at the household income, the household demographic, like who's in the household, the number of work able persons, the number of persons that are elderly or disabled. So, and then every 2 years, we look at that again. We recertify them every 2 years. We don't rerun background checks or things like that. We we look at income and household composition to determine whether they are a work able household, an elderly disabled household, and whether their income has increased or decreased.
Right. And so my follow-up question to that is then how are you recertifying people based on their eligibility deadline, I guess, or timeline? Because, if it's every 2 years, I imagine different people are different timeline, and how will that be impacted?
Right. So recertifications now, like you said, run on a 24-month basis. So essentially approximately 1/24 of our overall voucher holders get recertified every month. We start working with them 3 to 4 months ahead. So they get notice, they get a recertification packet, they fill it out, it's submitted, we review, we send a notice to them, and we work several months ahead. So it's not something that's a surprise 2 days before, their next tenant rent is due, as an example.
Okay. That was mostly my question, is on the eligibility and how it will be impacted. I wanted to get clarification from a user's perspective. Did I understand the medical allowance change that's now we're converting into a hardship allowance? I just want to make sure I
So
understand.
yeah, I want to be clear on that. So
Yeah.
we're eliminating the medical allowance except for those that are already receiving it, who will be grandfathered in.
Right.
In the future, if persons, not the folks that are grandfathered in, but if new households end up requesting a medical allowance, if their medical expenses are over 10,000, we will give them a direct allowance related to that 10,000. If it's under, basically they wouldn't generally receive a medical allowance, but they have the opportunity to access our existing hardship policy. So we have an existing hardship policy for Path to Success. It's not specific to medical allowance. It's a comprehensive hardship of anything that might have changed. So their circumstances might have changed. If you have $10,000 in medical expenses, you likely have experienced a significant long-term disability. We might need to look at whether or not you need to change program types from work able to elderly disabled, or whether or not you should be getting SSI. So maybe your income needs to increase. So we'd look at that comprehensively, not just automatically make an allowance.
And so you're saying, it sounds like you're saying that the Housing Commission will expand its sort of, I don't know, conversations with our
Information and be a better conduit of information. This is a question.
I mean, what else? We have this comprehensive hardship policy now, so I don't want to imply that all of a sudden we're going to change something.
Got you.
We have
Okay.
the comprehensive hardship policy now. We go through a process of review. We also have a hardship committee. So there's a very clear process in place. But I think to Commissioner Mitchell's point, working on how we communicate about the resources that are available to our customers out there is something we're constantly looking at how we can enhance, right? Because we know that we are one of the main, entities that they come to for assistance, even if it's not the housing assistance that we're paying, that they know that we are a safe place to come to for knowledge and information. So making sure that our staff are well informed about the resources that are available for people outside of what we provide is really an important part of the work that we're continuing to look at. And we learned a lot of that really through, the HSAP program and what we did. We were working with hundreds of thousands of folks where we were trying to get them connected to all the community resources that are available, not just ours.
So just on, if I can continue, on slide 5, Lisa, I just want to make sure I understand this slide. So we're saying that there's 13,000 in the house in participants in this program, and 802 number requested the allowance, and then 129 not receiving allowance. Can you just
right? So there's 13,000, just over 13,000 households.
Yeah.
There were about 930 who submitted a request for medical allowance. Of that 930, 802 were not eligible, and only 129 were. So of our entire MTW households, only 1% are actually receiving a medical allowance. 129 households. It's a very, very small cohort.
Yeah, so it's underutilized is what you're.
It's most people are not eligible.
Most people are not eligible.
Yeah, most people don't need it. So the majority don't need it. And only 1% are actually have eligible medical expenses that qualify for allowance of our entire program. So out of 13,129 households actually have eligible medical expenses according to HUD where they could receive an allowance.
And so the bullet that says hardship policy created for households with medical expenses over 10,000, that's currently what's happening.
That's what we will create. So yes.
So 129 are grandfathered right now. The 129 that have been approved are grandfathered in. Going forward, if you have a medical hardship request and you have medical bills that exceed 10,000, there's going to be a special program that you will be directed toward.
Yeah.
Does that make sense, Commissioner Hester?
I am going to re-ask. So let me see. What I heard, what I'm hearing is that families can qualify if they have over 10,000 medical, right?
Right.
And that's the new policy.
Yes. So for there's a hardship. So we will eliminate medical allowances overall. But if a household represents with more than $10,000 in medical expenses, they will receive a medical allowance equal to those expenses. And then anybody else has access to our regular comprehensive hardship policy where we would review the household's hardship overall.
And what's the expense? What's the value on the hardship?
For the ones where it's over 10,000, well, if their medical expenses are over 10,000, they will receive an allowance equal to that actual expense. So if it's $10,233, they would receive a medical allowance of $10,233.
Got it. Okay.
Any further questions?
I think, let me look at slide 8, because I think that was the other. But you can open it up to others. I'd like to just kind of.
Oh, yeah, but that's fine, Commissioner Ezra. The vice chair and I, we've had this conversation. It is a complicated discussion. You could never put this on an infomercial because no one would ever actually be able to get through it.
That's the problem. That's going to be an issue, right? Because our clients are.
Yeah, no, you're right. And I think that's why all the questions today, have made the point. And like I said, the vice chair and I had this conversation earlier, and it's a complicated discussion. And what I have learned over the years is that we are all inside baseball folks, right? We spend a lot of time with the commission. We hear the acronyms and the language, but the 13,000 participants in this program, they're not inside baseball, and how you communicate with them about the changes have to be done in a manner that reflects that they're hearing it in reality sometimes for the first time, and you have to break it down so that you're trying to eliminate the confusion. I will make this comment that Lisa made the statement, and I will define it. I think what the Housing Commission is in the minds of many people that are of our clients, we are the trusted advisor. So as the trusted advisor, it is our job to figure out how to enable them to better understand what's available, what they're not eligible for, and and ultimately guide them to the best landing spot for their situation. And as a trusted advisor, we embrace that role, and that means that we have to be great communicators. I would say that for the team, I do think the communication plan, and I thought Vice Chair Klumpner's questions about how you do this and when you do it is a good one. I think that we have to build a toolkit that we can try and create some ambassadors who can communicate this effectively in the CVO space. Let's be honest about the time period we're in right now. We are facing an unprecedented, well, I shouldn't say unprecedented. We are facing a very difficult 18 to 24 months, in my opinion. And I think people are going to be looking for answers and solutions as they struggle to get through what they're facing economically. As Vice Chair Klumpner said, rents are rising. And as Commissioner Benvenuto said, boy, it's almost like we're making these changes, and are we just throwing people out there into the wilderness? And that is how some people will view it. And therefore, we have to explain this better as to what we're doing and why we're doing it, because it's going to become more difficult for people over the next 18 to 24 months, not easier. So I think that anything we can do in the communication plan, Lisa, that really does talk about how we're going to communicate to everybody, but also talk about a toolkit that would enable others to communicate about these changes and what they mean. And more importantly, what your alternatives are, I think is important. A lot of people are going to be navigating this for the first time. And as the trusted advisor, we have to be sympathetic and we have to show empathy because that's what people are going to expect. I've seen it too often where someone goes, well, there's a brochure, go read that. That doesn't ever help.
I have some other questions if I can.
Sure. Yeah. Okay, Commissioner Archer, go ahead.
On slide 8, is it saying that 30% is not going to have an impact? 53% will see a $1 to $50 increase in their portion, yes, share portion
per month.
Is that's, I'm reading that correctly? Okay.
Sorry, yeah, sorry, I wasn't, I'm having to navigate a new microphone. Yes,
Yeah, no,
yeah,
sorry.
that is correct. 30% are anticipated to see no change. A little over 50% would see a change of less than $50. And again, for those that experience a change of more than $50, we'll be implementing a hardship policy of a 1-year, they're able to apply for a 1-year exemption. So there'll be plenty of time to make applications, increase income, look at your finances, and they'll also have access to our Achievement Academy as well.
Okay. Jeff, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to thank the commissioners for their advocacy for our clients and for really trying to see it through their eyes. I wanted to provide, hopefully some comfort to all of you in reminding you that, we've done something like 36 move to work initiatives over the course of the last 12 years. Some dozen of those or so have been quite significant, including the initial Path to Success implementation that we did 10 years ago. Choice Communities, not long after that. We've learned a lot about how to make sure that our clients really understand what changes are coming. We've learned a lot about making sure that they have time to get ready for those changes. And we've learned a lot about how to make sure that they have hardships available for those that are really going to be impacted in a way that's not sustainable. So we certainly hear you, but I also want to remind you that we've done this quite a few times. I think we were quite successful each of those times, and we've learned quite a bit over the course of the last 10 years about how to make sure our clients are considered as we make these changes.
Okay. Any further questions or comments? I look forward to seeing the communication plan in February. I think that's something that we will all have a significant interest in. And Jeff, I will, echo what you said. I think you have experience in doing this. I think that during these days, during these times, especially times like this, where there's economic strife and stress, you have to be the greatest communicator ever possible. So, all right. Seeing no further questions or comments, that this is an informational item, so no action is required, and that means that we will bring the open session of this agenda to a halt, to a close, and we will now reconvene in closed session. And the board, we will, in a few minutes, the board will be meeting in closed session, and the members of the public who wish to speak on the item on the closed session agenda should press *9 on their phones to raise their hand. No written comments were submitted for today's closed session. Chuck Christensen, will you please announce the closed session agenda for this morning?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. The Housing Commission will meet in closed session this morning to discuss its closed session agenda, which is the only matter set forth on that agenda, and has to do with the pending litigation reference on the closed session agenda. Which I
thank you, Chuck.
Yes.
We will now take public comments from callers about the closed session agenda. Scott Marshall, do we have any callers at this time?
We do not have any callers. Thank you.
Right.
Chair, can I request a 2-minute break?
You can request a 2-minute break. Yes, we will. It is 10:41. So let's get started back. We'll give you 3 minutes. So safety first, no run.
Thank you.
Okay. And we will then reconvene immediately in closed session. And we're going to conclude the public comment period for closed session. This is Mitch Mitchell, Chair of the San Diego Housing Commission Board of Commissioners. The board has concluded its closed session and is reconvening an open session at 11:07 a.m. The Housing Commission General Counsel Chuck Christensen will now announce the actions the board took in closed session. Chuck, please continue.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. The Housing Commission met in closed session to discuss the case listed on its closed session agenda. It gave direction to council by a unanimous vote of 6-0 on further actions to be taken in this case. That concludes the matters that were discussed in closed session.
Thank you very much, Chuck. This concludes the board's special meeting today. And if there are no further comments, the meeting is now adjourned at 11:07 a.m. Thank you to all my fellow commissioners. Happy New Year. Stay safe, and I will see you soon.
Happy New Year.
And thank you to the staff. for all you do. Thank you.
Thank you.